In this video we're going to make a small GPS example in Kotlin. I'm not going to be using a map feature, we're just going to be using a text view. So I'm going to go ahead and create an empty project. As you can see, we'll layout, we'll get the files open. This one already has a text view in the middle, so we're going to actually use that later on. So get our main activity open, and we'll get our manifest open. In the manifest we're going to go ahead and add the permissions so we can access the final location and the course location, because you need both on Android to be able to access the GPS. Once we've done that, save it. We're finished there. We're going to go back into the main activity. We're going to add our imports. So we're going to import the location manager. And we're going to import the text view widget so we can pass it. So location manager so we can actually access the GPS sensor, and the text view so we can write to a text view from within our Kotlin code. So with that, we'll go ahead and save it. We'll create a new Kotlin class. We're going to call it my location listener. Within this class, we're going to be wanting to be passing in the text view so we can write to it within the class and not have to mess about recalling the reference and everything. And then we're going to want to implement the location listener interface so that we can have all the methods for location listener. So here we go, private val text view, that's us passing it in location listener so we can inherit from that interface. So now we're going to need to create the method, create the methods we need to inherit. So on location change, this is the one that actually allows us to detect the event for a location change. I'm going to write that. On provider enabled, that's when you enable the GPS provider, and disable. We're not going to do anything with these methods, you just need to implement them. In this case we're just calling the superclass that we're inheriting from. Now there's a fourth one, but we'll come back to it later because it's technically depreciated, but you'll see later when it's not. So in this one we're just going to write to the text view that we're passing in the variable. We're going to write the latitude and longitude, and we're going to use the GPS and data that's passed on change. So latitude, longitude, and that's set up for some basic information already. So that will change the text view on the screen that we've passed in every time the GPS location changes. So go back to our Kotlin main. Now when we're dealing with any sensors or privacy issues in Android or iOS even, we need to request permission. Make sure we have users permission and check the permission is still granted or the sensor won't allow us to access them. So in this case we're going to bring in the manifest, which is where our permissions were stored, the package manager and the activity compatibility. I'm going to import those, so these handle privacy and device permissions. Within our onCreate, we're going to go ahead and activity compat and then check self permissions, and we're going to make sure pass in the application and then check our manifest. So manifest.permission.access course location. So we're going to check about permission, and we're going to say not equal to permission granted. So if it's not granted to something, we're also going to check access final location, because we may as well check both because we need both. It's not equal to, and if they're not equal to, we're going to go ahead and we're going to request the permission dialog from the Android OS. Come out, request permissions for the application, and we're going to pass in the array of what permissions we're asking for. So course and final location, and what value to return if they're granted. So request code, I'm just setting it to 0 and return. So we've now checked permissions and requested permissions. So permissions have been granted. Call our method set up location updates. We've not implemented it yet, so we'll throw in a little to do. And we're going to override on request permission result. That's our event that's called back when you request permission if you've got a result from it. So in this case, we've got the super, and then if request code equals 0, that's the code we sent to it when we requested permission. If it's 0, check that the results aren't empty, and then check both results to make sure that we have actually been granted permission. So in the array that's grant results, we're going to check, see, and array 0 was course location, array index 1 is find location. So permissions have been granted. I spelled where wrong, but we'll ignore that. And if they are granted, we'll call our method that we've not implemented yet. So, but we're at the point now where we've requested permissions, so we may as well go ahead and let's go ahead and actually implement our method. But in this method, we're going to have 3 variables, or 2 variables. Location manager, that's we're going to request a system service, and that's the location service, and we're going to want it as a location manager. We're then going to want the text view. We're going to find it in that find by ID in the resources. And we're going to use the r.id, and then the name of our ID for our text view component that's on the screen. Now we haven't set it to GPS location yet, so add an R little to do. And then location listener is the my location listener class that we created ourselves, and the text view that we pass into it. So location manager request location updates location. We're going to send that in. We're going to send in the GPS provider. So in this case, Android used to allow you, Kotlin used to, but in this case now it actually needs for you to check the permissions. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to basically take the same checks from above, but change it from not equal to equal to, because we only want it to actually run it when we have permission. Checking the find location, got permission for that. We're going to check the course location, and if we have permission on both, go ahead and run our code, please. So we've fixed that. Now let's go ahead and fix our ID, which was GPS location. We want that one. That one doesn't have an ID, so let's set an ID for this little text view that was already there. So it's now fixed. Yep, there we go. So that's now done, and we have implemented set location updates. So we're going to go ahead and run. And this is all error right now, and that's because even though there's a method that's depreciated, it's still actually looking for it to be implemented in our interface. So we're going to go ahead and add it, and that is override function and on status change. It is depreciated now, but it needs it there. So our program now functions. Latitude and longitude are displayed, and we can change that by setting location, as you can see on screen. Handy a little program, but doesn't really do anything, so let's just go ahead and just extend it a little bit. So we're going to give it a nice little target. So target location equals a little type of location, we're going to call it target, and then we're going to set the latitude and longitude for our target, and I have them in a clipboard, so let me just grab it off the map. There we go. And target location longitude, and that is the GPS coordinates for UHI West Highland. Portree campus. Then we're going to write a little function, just is it in range, and we're going to look for a current location and a target location and a range. So distance to equals current location dot distance to target location, and we're going to return distance to if it's less than or equal to range, and I've just realised I've forgot it. So range type float. To return is it less than, so it's now returning a boolean, not a float. So we need to make sure our method's actually going to return a boolean. There we go. But now does, so we can now use this. If is in range, our current location and our target location, and then let's see, 50. Now let's change it too big. 10. So within 10 meters. Now our text doesn't really make sense, so let's change it to sound a bit more useful. You have arrived at Portree campus for UHI West Highland. Else text view dot text as you are, and then we can send how far away we are away from the campus. So location distance to target location. So there we go. So when our program now actually does something. I know most people would use a map at this point, but I'd rather not use a map component because we're only looking at this GPS sensor. So you're away from it, and we are now going to zoom in. I'm still more than 10 meters away from what it thinks. There we go. You've arrived.